parents tend to be very stressed out and even punishing. Now, this is very important to remember. Some of these are very much a coping strategies for kiddos.
So we'll start to talk a little about kind of red flags. And so I'll list a couple of red flags. And when you think about autism, some of the red flags are things where there's just not as much eye contact. And eye contact's not mandatory. Kid doesn't have to look at you all the time, but there's just a low level amount of. I know in a previous podcast we talked about joint attention. So if you go to that podcast, it really talks about how important that skill is to share an experience. Very limited gestures. One of the things that we see a lot with kiddos, the communication doesn't grow far. So there are a lot of this be like a name for it, but they lead you by the hand to the kitchen, and then they point you in direction. And they're like, my reinforcements over here somewhere. Please get this for me. And so maybe even for a future podcast, we could just focus on that, just how to stop that, the communication by lead. Of course, lots of sensory. That seems to be not for all kids, but a lot of sensory, which kind of distracts. And so whether environment's too loud or they need lots of stimulation can definitely go in there. You mentioned some repetitive movements. And so it's just that whether it's the body movement, so of course we see the body rocking, the hand flapping. And by all means, these things don't need to be punished. They're just kind of part of how someone's getting out their energy. But we need to acknowledge that these repetitive movements, we need to just take a look and see if there's something more that could be an autism diagnosis. With that, just we call overreactive from a behavior standpoint to the environment. So for some kiddos, just eating a different chicken nuggets, no problem. They just want the nuggets. For some kids, when you change that sippy cup, even like the look of the nuggets, and they have precision on that is not the nugget that's cooked at 17 minutes and 23 seconds. I'm rejecting this. Is not happening. Could be, some of that potential. So I guess, Dr. Chen, what are some ways that we could be proactive and just kind of practical ways to track some of these to kind of know if it's time to get a diagnosis? What are some of your thoughts there?
We have come a long way in terms of screening kids with autism, right? Like right now, the prevalence is 1 out of 36. And I felt like when we started our career, it's like there were number like 100 out of 110 and 1 out of 64. And I come from China, and I remember one paper published in China talk about only 1% of population kids have autism, right? That's very, very low. And nowadays, people are more aware of autism, and there's a lot of research on early detection, on early screening. So, a good place to start for parents is to look at a screening tool called the Modified Checklist for Autism in Toddlers, and we'll put it in the link below. It's called MChat. So this tool is free. It's for children 16 to 30 months. And this is the screening tool that has been used a lot by pediatricians, and it's a tool that have gone through a lot of thorough research and has good validity and reliability, which means that, it's actually for kids who have gone through the screening tool later on, 2 or 3 years, and the kids who were flagged by this tool as may have autism actually are diagnosed with autism later on, which means this tool is valid tool. So MChat is a good way to start. And then another website I would recommend parents to take a look. It's called the Baby Navigators. We'll also post under the link below. So the Baby Navigator is a website that has funding from Department of Education, NIH, Department of Florida, and also it has been there for a while. It's run by a faculty, Amy Weatherby, I think she's at the University of Florida, maybe Florida State. So she has done a lot of research. She's herself is a speech language pathologist, and she has a tool. It's for kids from 9 to 24 months. Think about it. So we have a tool that it can detect autism, not detect, the screen for autism as early as 9 months of age. The reason why we can do that early is because joint attention emerges around the 9 month of age. The baby's pointing, shifting eye gaze. Those are the early social communication signals for us to see, whether the child is initiate communication, and we can see the social reciprocity based on those gestures and then those facial gaze. So check out MChat and the Baby Navigator. You'll be able to see some of the red flags they listed there. And Michael, you mentioned about, all the don't think the symptoms being or the behavior indicators being punishing. I think that's very important for parents to understand that when you see repetitive behavior and when you see your child who is overreactive to the sensory input in the environment. And when you see the flapping hand mannerism, and I saw some of the parents just feel very stressed out, like, oh my gosh, he's doing this again, and he's rocking back and forth again, and he's talking things just like scripting, talking to himself. Parents tend to sometimes be very stressed out and even punishing some of that. Now, this is very important to remember. Some of these are very much coping strategies for kiddos. There's this recent review paper came out on repetitive restrictive interest, and then they talk about, this is a coping mechanism for a child, especially a very young child. Think about when you come home, after a long day at work, you put your legs up on the couch, you're laying down and just chilling. And if I come to you saying, gotta sit up straight, you can't lay down, where are you putting your legs? Take a moment to think about how you would feel, right? And you are coping with the stress to some degree after a long day of work, and that's your happy place. There's nothing wrong of putting your legs up, on a couch to relax, right? Well, sometimes I think it could backfire when we require our kid, like, well, you are not doing this. Still hands, or, when our kids walking back and forth, well, let's not move that way. And it creates a lot of anxiety in our kiddos, right? And I've seen so many children when they're happy and they clap their hands and they do this. I do that too. And, I imitate that behavior. I want them to know, hey, buddy, I know you're happy, right? If that behavior is not impeding learning, if that behavior is not slowing down a child progressing learning and impose a very significant barrier, and I think we need to take a deep breath and let it go. And I really reemphasize what Michael you just mentioned, that try not to punishing these behaviors. And now self-injury, aggression, property destruction we seeing in kiddos on the spectrum, those are different. Those are the behavior. You need to work with the BCBAs, you work with your team, have a plan, like what to reduce, what to teach, how to teach the replacement skill, how to teach the desired skills. These are safety concerning behaviors. These are different from some of the repetitive behavior we're seeing in children with autism at the different developmental stages.
It is, I think some of it is just because there's just so much, when there's uncertainty, we want to try to control. And I'm happy that, the more we understand just kids in general, let alone special needs kids, it's allowing them to be themselves. So by all means, our job is not to change them. Our job is to help create an environment where they can be optimized so that they can navigate society, that they can get their needs met, that they can communicate, and then most importantly, that they're able to advocate for themselves. And so this allows this ability to be a little bit flexible in what we're trying to accomplish. So for a lot of parents, especially the moms, even early on, they have an idea that something's a little bit different. And so I am so happy that we are diagnosing kids earlier and earlier. You mentioned 9 months. When I first started around 2000, when we saw a kid at 4, we were excited because that was the young kid, was the 4-year-olds. And then a little later in my career, it was the 3-year-olds that started to show up. And then after that, it was the 2-year-olds. And so I've worked with kids as young as 14 months and even talked to some kids that are around 12 months. So this is all good. We're going in the right direction of being more proactive. It's just because early intervention is so important and it allows us to kind of make use. But for a lot of parents, you kind of see something's going on, but you're not getting the buy-in from family members and especially
Mhm.
that pediatrician. What do you suggest to be, a kind but squeaky wheel just to make sure that your concerns are not just being brushed off? Thanks for watching. Are you ready for support? Look in the description below to book a free consultation call. We also have free downloadables from Parent Empowerment Coaching and our quest to help parents fight for 15 minutes. Stay empowered, stay informed. We'll talk again soon.